The Knight in Rusty Armor by Robert Fisher. The entire story is set in medieval times. There's a knight, and he is wearing shiny armor, and he has to go on a journey because he is stuck in his armor. That's the plot. We're not going to spoil the ending. I hope we're not going to spoil the ending for you, but we're going to talk about some of the things that's leading up to the solution at the end. It's not your typical journey in that there is no dragon to slay, per se. The dragon that the knight has to take care of is himself. So it's really a different take on your traditional knight story, but it fits perfectly in with our message of what we've always talked about on this show.
This is one of the greatest stories I've ever read. Let me tell you why. Number one, I hate reading, and it was a short enough story that I was able to get through it, start to finish. I was finding myself going, wow, there's a lot of themes in here that we try to hit on every single day. Not just on the show, mind you, but by the tenets and the philosophy we live by. A lot of these themes match that. So, I mean, it was a great story. The Knight in Rusty Armor by Robert Fisher. For anybody who is even a little bit contemplating their spiritual path, contemplating their philosophy, contemplating the place that they're in, this is a good story to help remind you of all those things that you're trying to live up to. So, that was my take on the story. This will be one of those that will stay on my desktop, and I will read it from time to time because, it's a great piece of inspiration as well, David. And it has my favorite character in the whole world, Merlin the Wizard. You gotta love Merlin. You gotta love Merlin the Wizard. He's everywhere.
All right. In preparation for the show, you put together several topics to speak on, as did I. So let's just toss them back and forth. You throw your first one out. Let's do it.
Some of these may sound like we're beating a dead horse. Well, good, because we're trying to. That horse ain't dead enough yet. The first one I wrote down, David, on this story, the one thing I got out of this was wrapping yourself in an idea is much different than living and being what it is you're thinking about.
Mm-hmm.
All too many times, we find an idea that we fall in love with. We think about it so much, and we forget to live that idea. We forget to take that idea further and be that idea, be that example of what we love so much. The biggest example that comes to my mind, when I first came to the Jedi community 10 years ago, it was the ideal of the Jedi. I fell in love with it because here these guys, they stand for all this great stuff, and they're out saving the world, and they're out, doing this and this. But what I didn't realize at first, and it took me many years, just like it takes most of us, I wasn't being a Jedi. I was acting like one. I was trying to be an ideal. And the key is to take an idea, take the parts of it that you can use, and throw the rest of the crap away. You don't have to encompass every single part of an idea. Just take the parts that you can actually honestly, every day, live up to.
To draw a computer metaphor there, it would be something akin to leaving something on your desktop as opposed to embedding it into your root directory. A lot of information we learn or we come across. Ooh, that's a good little soundbite there. I like that. And that's what it stays. It's just a soundbite, and you regurgitate it. And that's all a lot of people do is they just regurgitate what they've heard someone else say, someone else's thoughts. It's not coming from within them. It's just stuff that they've got piled on their desktop. And once that screen gets so full, your whole system really slows down, and it will lock up on you. And that's what happened in this story.
Yeah, it certainly does.
How many people have we known that were in love with the idea of being in love?
Me?
That's so
Hell,
cliche.
I can say I was. I can say that I was. Yeah. Absolutely.
It's part of the maturing process, though. I believe you always start out thinking you are something, and then by the time that you figure out how to actually be that thing, you realize that you weren't before. That's a key sign that you have learned at that point.
Back to something that I say a lot. It's usually pretty heartbreaking when you realize you've been fucking lying to yourself your whole life. And it has nothing to do with other people. Our parents our clergymen, our teachers, our brothers, our sisters, our cousins, whatever, for the most part, David, their intentions for us are pure, and their intentions for us to be successful and to be strong and to survive, stuff like that. Those intentions are good, but it helps us lie to ourselves, and we have to get to a point where we don't fall in love with being in love. We fall in love with that person for, my wife is a good woman because she stands up to me when I'm full of shit, because she does this and she does that. I love the bad things about her. I love the good things about her, you know. To love something for the sake of loving it because it's romantic, because you want to be a superhero, well, you're lying to yourself, and that was a big part of the story. The guy was so wrapped up in being the ideal that he ends up trapping himself inside that ideal and can't figure out how to get out.
Yeah, that was exactly one of my points. And I'm just gonna read it exactly like it was in the book. Merlin is explaining the nature of time to this knight, and he says, "Past, present, and future are all one when you're connected to the source." And the knight says, "What source?" He said, "Is the mysterious and visible power that is the origin of all." And the guy's like, "I don't understand." He said, "That's because you're trying to understand with your mind. Your mind is limited." And he says, "I have a very good mind," argued the knight. And Merlin says, "and a very clever one, too. It trapped you in all that armor." So, I mean, what we're talking about now, it fits right into the story, because usually the smarter you are, the harder it is to get out of the own trap, because the trap is one of your own making, you know? And the better it's constructed, the harder it is to free yourself from it.
And, you know, David, I hope what I'm saying doesn't come across like I'm trying to be elite about this, okay? Because I was in that boat many years, just like everyone else. I found myself in love with things, or trying to be in love with the ideal of things, instead of trying to be those things, you know?
But isn't it pretty much a given that because we can speak on these things that we actually went through them?
Absolutely. I just want to make it clear that it may be hard for some people to see that they're still in love with an ideal rather than being.
Yeah.
Have faith. It will happen. Like it happened to me, for most of us, it's going to happen in ways that we are not going to be happy with, but we're just going to have to take it and run with it, persevere through it, fight through it, because you're going to bust through those doors and you're going to say, "God damn, I'm glad I went through that crap, because now I'm a better person for it."
Yeah. Well, plus you can always take what you have experienced and recognize that pattern of being so sure of yourself in a condition, and then come to find out later that you weren't, and you shouldn't have been so sure. And you get to the point where you apply it to your present, not just to your past, but to your present.
Right.
And you come to that point that you're still full of it, you know?
Yeah.
And it's okay. Yeah. You realize that you're full of it, and that makes you smarter than you would have been had you not realized that. And that goes into another one of my little quotes where he's having a dialogue with the squirrel, and he says, "You know, I'm starting to think that animals are smarter than people." And the squirrel says, "Well, just because you thought that means that you're getting better."
Yeah, it's a hell of a thing. I mean, it's one of those things where, you know, I remember looking back and going, "Damn, it was that simple." But man, it seemed like a mountain. It seemed like I had to climb up this mountain. Sometimes you forget, though, if you're not paying attention to what's going on around you, as you are getting through these things. It's hard to recognize the changes in ourselves sometimes too. What was another point that took away from the book here?
Well, during the talk with Merlin had pretty much gotten through to him that he should not expect so much and that he should accept more. He ran around with all these expectations, and the world was not fulfilling them, and he was on the warpath. You know, he was out to right the wrong. You know. Well, when Merlin finally made his point be known, he asked Merlin, "Are you suggesting that I should be happy with this armor? I should just accept it too?" Merlin says, "No, you weren't born with that armor. You put that on yourself. And have you asked yourself why?" So, a lot of times when you're navigating these problems and you come across an answer that seems to work, just because the answer worked in that particular spot does not mean you can apply it across the board, you know? And lots of things work that way. If you do it incorrectly, what you wind up with is what we call cognitive dissonance, you know?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You follow me on that?
Yeah.
So, I mean, these ideals, every ideal that I can think of, I have traced that thing down, and it'll come to an extreme point where it turns on itself and becomes its opposite. And it's at that point where you have to say, okay, that's as far as this one can go. That's the, I've reached the edge of what this ideal can do, and now you're on to exhaust another one.
Yep. My next one was fear and doubt has a way of tricking us into trapping ourselves. This goes back to a lot of us not taking responsibility for our own feelings, not taking responsibility for our own emotions, the consequences of our actions. We don't even consider how many people may be affected by me flipping a guy the bird.
Yeah.
We allow fear and doubt to trap us. And it's not fear and doubt that's trapping us, Dave. It's ourselves trapping us because of the fear and doubt that we're allowing inside us.
Well, let's get the semantics right here. I'm looking for useful quotes. Okay? I come across one that reads something very much like the greatest barrier to success is the fear of failure. And I'm like, wow, that sounds really deep. But if all people was afraid of was failure, they would run towards success. So what is keeping everybody from achieving what they want? And the reason for this is because the fear of failure is not the greatest barrier from success. The greatest barrier is fear of succeeding.
Yes.
Who are we not to be beautiful? Who are we not to be intelligent?
Right.
That kind of line of thinking. Most people cannot acknowledge this to themselves because they have built an entire paradigm in their head, in their mind, that just completely goes against that way of thinking, and that is their armor. Mm-hmm. And to think that kind of thought would be to unravel everything that they've worked for. So instead of setting down their baggage, instead of knocking off the walls to the house they built, they continue on with it, trying to plug a square peg into a round hole, and it never works. Mm-hmm. And usually, like in this story, there comes a breaking point. There's always that reason why you had to stop doing it, isn't there? Something always happens. I'm seeing a big black clad guy going, no. Wake up, dude. Help me out here.
No, you're on the right track. I mean, okay. And we have to understand that just like a lot of different words that we throw out at our students or we throw out at each other, fear is fear, but some fears are useful and some are debilitating. Fear is not man's greatest enemy, folks. Man is man's greatest enemy. We are our own worst enemies, and we always have been, mainly because I think we're afraid of what we are capable of, or perhaps we're afraid of, I don't know. I mean, it's a question I still contemplate to this day. Why are people still failing? Why are people still sleeping? Why are they not freaking out and waking up and fighting against their own greatest enemies, which is themselves? Well, I think they're afraid of something.
Yeah. Some people would say they're still plugged into the system. I mean, they're emotionally and psychologically dependent on certain things, and for that freedom that they could get if they unplugged, they choose to remain that way for safety reasons. They have convinced themselves that they cannot exist without certain factors in their lives. The thing about it is, you take an abusive relationship. Let's say the guy's just beating the snot out of the girl all the time, and you ask her, why don't you leave him? And she says, because I love him, right? What's really going on here is that he is providing for her the security blanket, the emotional security that she craves, and for it, because he is acting inappropriately, he is causing problems within the relationship by hitting her. you take a very good case of, and I forget the name of the disorder, but it the one where hostages fall in love with their captors. That situation. It's the same exact situation in a domestic case, because she'll say on one side she weighs out all the positives and he does all this and helps her out that way, but then on the other he causes this. She cannot see the cause of the security is also the cause of the damage that she's wanting to get away from, and she can't unite those two thoughts in her mind as being as coming from one source, you know.
Right.
I mean, if I sold candy that made your head explode when you ate it, it wouldn't be too hard for you to connect those dots, would it? But they sell products every day that are just absolutely no good for us, like, you know, soda and cigarettes and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
It's legal, perfectly legal, you know, and people buy it. I do. I buy both of them. So, I mean, but that's just the nature of the game. You have to realize that the very thing that you have come to love is the very thing that you must hate. And in the Buddhist context, they call that killing the Buddha, where you have to turn your back on the idea that there is another Buddha somewhere else because you are Buddha.
Right.
I mean, and that's just one very, you know, slender way of looking at it, but that same concept fits into a lot of different places in other religions and ideologies and a lot of other philosophies, just in a different way.
Mm-hmm.
If you really look for it, you can find that turning point fitting in.
All right, let's bring Charles in here. He looks like he has something to say here.
Well,
all right.
Hey, did you get a chance to read this story?
Yes, I did.
All
I
right.
liked it. First thing I want to hit on, something David actually kind of brought up. You know, the story is also mirrored in the Star Wars story, the prequels, as funny as that sounds. And most people won't see it at first, and I didn't see it until he made the little joke about some dude, you know, sitting there yelling, no. But, you know, it really is Vader becomes trapped in his armor, you know, permanently.
Mm-hmm.
And his armor is made up of his doubts and his fears. It's a result directly of it. You know, he shows up, hops on this planet, sees his wife, sees his best friend, and he says, "You two are together." Well, if that's not fear, if that's not doubt, if that's not every negative emotion balled up into one that led to him wearing that armor, I don't know what is. On a more practical standpoint on that, why do people give in to this? Conditioning, really, more than anything. What I've seen from a very, very early age, we are told that we should be seen and not heard, that our opinion doesn't matter. We've been told that we are great and wonderful, but we're no better than anybody else. It's always done in such a way as to condition us not to see ourselves as great and wonderful, but see ourselves more as being less. So the result is we get conditioned into it. And we start it at schools. We start it in the techniques that are used in parenting a lot. We start it in so many ways. I had the misfortune of watching a YouTube video earlier.
Oh, God.
Should I not bring that up?
No.
Oh, go ahead.
No, I think it's a prime example.
Yeah.
It's a prime example over in Texas. There's a judge who's been basically, he was beating his teenage daughter, and I don't mean he was spanking her. I mean he was beating, okay? He was laying down a whooping that would have made my grandfather's grandfather's grandfather proud, and that's not a good thing.
What can we Google on YouTube to find that, Charles?
You give me 1 second, and I'll be able to tell you what you can Google on it. I'll keep talking as I get that in there, because I can type and talk enough to find this one out. But what got me was the sheer ferocity of it, and how more than anything, it was him trying to inflict a form of complete submission. Not to punish, not to get a point across, but he wanted submission on such a level that he broke her spirit entirely. And what a lot of people don't realize is there's a difference between curbing a spirit and breaking it. And if you wanted to Google this, you would want to Google Texas judge beating daughter. That should bring it up pretty quick. But that kind of gets you a little bit into it. The conditioning is what really got me. I've studied up on the concepts of brainwashing, the concepts of mental reprogramming, just because it's good to know what people can and can't do to you and how they would go about doing it. It's helpful because people will do it in everyday conversation if you let them, if they're not aware of it or if you are aware of it. And that's what I seen. This man seen some spark and fire that he didn't want in her, and he was going to beat it out. It's a form of conditioning. It was something very similar to the things that you read about in the labor camps over in Nazi Germany during World War II. The same psychological profile and response. And I guess the point I'm getting at is that that's really what messes with people is the conditioning, because once you believe that you deserve what you're getting, whatever it is, then you're stuck. You're done. If you look at the world and you say, oh, I have this and I have this and I deserve it. I'm here because I deserve it and I don't deserve any better. You're done at that point.
But Charles, it's not a lifelong condition. It can be cured, can it not?
Yes, it can. Yes, it can. It takes becoming empowered. It takes really trusting your emotions, trusting your feelings internally, not the feelings that you've been conditioned into, but the ones at the deepest root. Because those feelings will continue to rebel against it, much like the man who chafes in his armor.
Mm-hmm. So, Charles, we hit on a couple points. David and we've gotten through 2 so far. One of those was fear and doubt, a way of tricking and trapping us ourselves, tricking us into trapping ourselves. Wrapping yourself in an idea is much different than living and being. David, what was one of yours, just to kind of recap?
I was talking about how ideas can't be applied across the board.
Right.
It's relevant even within the story itself. Merlin even gets on to him about eating meat, at one point in time. Mm-hmm. And I was thinking, wow, the writer of the book didn't even catch that one. But that's okay. Nobody can catch them all.
Yeah. So, Charles, you think these things that we've been talking about so far kind of fit with the theme of the story, and more importantly, are these themes that we can actually apply to our lives?
Oh, definitely. I'll throw one in there too to get us moving in the next direction in the story. And I'm not going to say too much. I don't want to ruin it, but it begins as something that is not an all the time occurrence. It begins this armor as something that he puts on and takes off, and eventually it no longer is that. One of the things with personas, as I like to call them, is making sure you don't get stuck in a fake one, as it were. Yeah, we all wear a mask to a degree at different points in our life, but you don't want to be putting that mask on so often that you never take it off.
Yeah, I think we do that by accident a lot of times, Charles. I'll give you a good example. I'm a father of several daughters. I find myself when I go out in the world and I'm dealing with other people, especially young female people, I find myself being stuck as that father. And I find myself addressing and treating this person as if they were my daughter because I'm so used to being a father. A father is just another mask. Radio show guy is another mask. Ashla Master is a different mask, so on and so forth. You see my point? It's really hard not to get stuck in those types of roles when we play them so often, because we kind of have to. If I don't play the role of father, who will? In my house.
Well, yeah, definitely. But also look at the root of that mask. Even in the story, the root of it is still just to a degree. The root of it, there is still a good portion of it. There's still how can I put this? There's still a light on the candle, as it were, even if the light you're seeing isn't necessarily the one you're perceiving. Mm-hmm. When you do those things, when you put that mask on.
Well, the sky is full of false suns, though,
Exactly. You put the mask on initially because something within you sees the purpose of the mask. And what I like within the story, the very beginning, it really states, the armor was there first, because he was going out on crusades. And Merlin raises a point about fear on that. I'm not going to get into it too much, but you'd be silly not to wear armor if you're going into a fight. You'd be silly not to harden yourself for a situation that you're going into. But at the same time, that situation comes to an end at some point. You know, Justin, in the example you've given, I doubt you've ever talked to your wife the way you would your daughter. But she's a woman, right?
Well, I have, but I have, but she has quickly corrected me, mind you.
Exactly. She seen you putting the armor on, and she said, no armor in the bedroom. Right?
You give her way too much credit there. She's the things that we probably couldn't even talk about on the radio. But go ahead.
Oh wow, I didn't mean to go there, Justin. What I'm just saying is that mask served its purpose, just as the armor initially served a purpose. You know, the problem was that eventually that's all he was the armor. At the end of the day, you take your mask off, even if you realize that you put it on, or even if you didn't realize you put it on. At the end of the day, you sit down and you go, wow, I put that mask on. I didn't even think about putting that mask on. And you make the realization that you did that. And the next time that mask starts to come on, you've got a hold on it. You can make the choice.
Well, Charles, what is the distinction between existing and living a vital life? And how does it apply to the situation?
Well, existing,
as far as armor goes.
In existing, that's really the situation of the armor. You are existing. You are alive in the sense that you are not dead. Right. But the same thing could be said of a zombie. The same thing could be said of someone who is completely mindless. You know, someone who is catatonic. You know, yeah, you're existing, but you are no longer part of the world. The armor has deadened you at that point. Now, that goes with the same idea of the mask. When you put that mask on, it deadens you to a point. And maybe you need deadened for that one moment, but it's when it starts to deaden you all the time, you're no longer living. You're no longer actively taking part in your life. It's that little pre-programmed course. I'll give you an example from my day-to-day, and I won't talk about much where I work, but someone brought up to me how friendly I am. And I said to him, you know, every day I look at it, and no matter what the problems or troubles, I ask myself, do I want to have fun today and enjoy this? Or do I want to be, you know, miserable and in pain? And that's me actively, every day, asking that question. I do ask it. It's not just something that I programmed in. I literally, when I head out the door, I go, man, do I want to have a really good day or do I want to have a really bad one? Do I want to just have a humdrum one? You know, what do I want this day to be for me? And some days it is just a humdrum day. Some days I need to be a little bit more relaxed, a little bit more cool, you know?
Okay. Hey, David.
Yeah, man.
I'll go ahead and go next on my next one here. Another point in the story that hit me, it was actually a show topic that we were gonna do. I think we were gonna do it. I don't think we ever did it, but no matter what our status or our prestige or how much honor we have, we all, every last one of us, at some point, need someone else to help us through. Whatever it is. And because, number one, honor, prestige, status, all that stuff is given to you by somebody else who gives a shit because they can take it right away at their whim, at their discretion. This point is illustrated in the story when his armor, he gets to a point where he can't even lift up the face mask or the flap, you know, and he can't eat, he can't drink, he can't do nothing, you know. Merlin has all these animals feeding him. They're putting the food in their mouth, they're chewing it up, and then they're kind of smushing it through the face mask of the helmet, you know. And for as big and as badass and as tough and as knightly and as all his prestige and honor, he couldn't even feed himself a walnut, let alone anything else. So, you know, the point I got through that from that was no matter what our station or status is, we still all need somebody to help us through life.
And you know what? It is very strange at the sources that inspiration and resources come from. places you would never expect it.
Yeah.
If you think back during your life, during the darkest moments, during the times where you didn't even know how you could make it through, there would be an element that came in from the outside that always just seemed to happen at the right time, in the right way to make things go the way they do. I know it's cliche, with the plastic bag and American Beauty and all that, but there really is, and the we interviewed the guy from the Golden Dawn that time, and they called it the Holy Guardian Angel.
Mm-hmm.
But there really is a higher self, or some perceived outside force that really does always come in and present exactly what you need when you need it, when things couldn't happen any other way. I mean, I've been there before. I've been so broke that I was wondering how we were gonna buy groceries for the week. Mm-hmm. The phone was gone. All the bills that could be gotten rid of were gone, and I'm sitting here, trying to come up with grocery money. We made it,
Yeah, here you are.
Well, I mean, that's where friends and family really shine, is during times of hardship, and that's when that's really when you can really tell who actually truly cares about you. That's my way of looking at it. I don't know, it might be different for you guys, but
no. I can tell you, this also reminds me, what you just said, David, also reminds me of something that Deepak Chopra said once, and I won't even try to remember where he said this. It is as important to be a gracious receiver of a gift as it is a giver, and this kind of gets into next topic, next hour, but you know what? Allow people to help you, I don't care if you wear a cape and you think you're a goddamn superhero. Even Superman needs somebody to pull the kryptonite off his chest every once in a while too. So you have to put the pride away, and sometimes you have to bite the bullet, as they say, and accept that help. Even the most powerful of people need help sometimes, and that's what it reminds me of. You have to accept a gift as gracious as you'd give one.
If thriving is nothing but a glorified state of survival, what you're talking about now would be allocating power and resources in much the same way that someone that's down on their luck only has that safety net of the unplanned resource that helps them out. If you're not that low on the totem pole, if you hadn't had that bad of a hard time, it's still best to relinquish to designate duties. I mean, you can't go through life carrying everything on your shoulders. It's better to spread it around and let other people take the load, because in a real sense, like part of a problem that you may need me to take care of, if you took care of it, it would weigh heavily upon you because it's your problem. I mean, it's right there in your face. It's your business, But if you hand it to me and you say, David, I need you to take care of this for me, bud, and I take care of it, it's the same work is being applied to it, but because it's not mine, because it's not, I'm not dependent on this directly, it doesn't weigh on me as heavily as it would you. So the cost of having the same amount of work is far less if people work together to get things done. Mm-hmm. And that's really why I like communities and group. I wouldn't say so much group think. I mean, there's a line that you got to draw there, but when you start dealing with people working together, there's massive amounts of power that can be generated just synergetically, just like our groups of shows. These guys that we have taken on board with us, these other hosts, Master Derek Thompson and Charles, is he still on the line? These guys are more. They're more than pulling their own weights. If you look at the numbers in our stats, we took on, if you calculate so many hours and so many listeners per show or whatever, our listeners has grown per show greater than it should have been, that tells me that there's been a synergetic increase in listeners just because there's more of us now. And that just feeds right back into what we're talking about here. It's the same thing in your life, with your own family, with the people you know, your friends and everything.
Mm-hmm. Yep, very true.
All right. I'm going to be quiet a while, but I'm going to ask you, is being quiet more than not talking? And what do I mean by it?
I've put more work in trying to be quiet than I ever have talking on a radio show.
Yeah.
You know?
What is being quiet?
For me, being quiet is when you get to that place where it's cliche to say, you know, sit down and meditate, reach out, blah, 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 which is all fine and good. But, you know, I mean, it's really great when you have people in front of you and you just throw that out there like a flashcard, you know. 3 times 3 is 9. For me, being quiet is understanding that there is more going on in a tiny, unmeasurable amount of silence than there ever will be downtown New York City, where everything is just going off at once. It's where you learn to center yourself, and where you start to learn everything about yourself. No noise is required, and I think when we talk about being quiet, it's not so much keeping our mouths shut. It's learning to trust and be in contact with that which guides us and moves us, which is really ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but it's what happens whenever you drop the armor, right? When you take off all the armor and you're just sitting on the couch being yourself, right?
Yeah, you know, it's illustrated in the story, David, by the poor guy. He's been stuck in this damn armor. He's met this crazy ass wizard named Merlin, and nothing the guy says makes sense. It just infuriates him every time the bearded man talks to him. And he goes to sit under a tree, and he sits on a squirrel's tail, and the squirrel starts talking to him, you know. And he doesn't even realize that he's talking to the squirrel until he makes the squirrel mad. And the squirrel starts talking shit to him, and he gets mad at the squirrel, and he says, wait a minute, I'm talking to a squirrel. Well, he got to that point where he stopped. He learned how to reach out beyond his armor and grasp onto and feel the vibrations from other life forms, you know.
Yeah. So it's a like you say, it's a matter of orientation and perspective too. Because if you got that internal chatterbox running all day and all night, then when do you ever have time for true thought?
Right.
You know, like you opened up the show with the idea that this is not a show. You know, what you see is not what you have in your mind, not your thoughts about them, not your idea about them.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have this image of how you relate to the rest of the world, and you fall in love with that image, and you try to make that image become real, then you're going to be running off in all different kind of directions, getting into all kind of different skirmishes, trying to fight your way to the top. But if you can ever stop your roll and realize where you fit into it all, and don't expect, I mean, it's nice to have dreams and all, but you have to realize that you're not going to achieve your dreams by expectations. You're going to achieve your dreams by working towards smaller challenges.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe with that kind of runs me into an idea I've been working on here of late about challenges, where I visualized a bucket of sand being poured out, and I noted that the pile of sand it made on the ground always had a proportion between the base circumference and the height of the cone that it created. And as the sand falls out of the bucket, it hits the point, the top of the point, and it rolls down the side of the cone, and it makes the circle on the bottom builder. It makes the circle on the bottom bigger. So the bottom circumference always stays in correct proportion to the top. So with that proportion, what you can see in your own life is that the base, that circle that is created on the ground, is pretty much the area of the people that you're trying to influence, for good or bad. And the height of the cone is your relative position to everything else. So if you spread your energy out way too far, what's going to happen is going to be too thin, and it's just going to work its way into the soil, and you won't have anything. But if you try to stack the sand too high, what you're going to find is that it topples over and crumbles. And you have the story of Julius Caesar and all that anti-ambition logic that goes in with that story. But in the real sense, in our current version of what we're looking at here, when people become too greedy, they always fall because they always want too much. Once that becomes identified in a person, everybody else is like, they just want everything for themselves. And so they think about themselves, and everybody turns their back on the person. Then they have no resources. So it's all about keeping that proportion of base to height, and even with challenges themselves. And I'm gonna go ahead and go on into it. It's 11 o'clock. Even with challenges themselves, and me and Charles has talked about this on the phone. When something is a challenge, you know that it is a challenge because it's hard. If it was not hard, it would not be a challenge. And you also know that it's a challenge because it is doable. If it was not doable, it would be impossible. Therefore, when you see a challenge, that means, yes, you could do it if you really set your mind to it, but it's going to be hard, but it can be done. And that's how you can identify what is within your reach and what is not. If there's an asterisk in there about you really have to use the common sense on determining, a lot of these factors, exactly what I'm talking about. But once you get it refined and you understand what I'm talking about, then it's really about doing what you can. I mean, that's plain and simple. It boils down to do what you can, when you can, to who you can.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I'm going to share with you my last one, and then you can share with us any more that you had down there, David. If you want to change the world, first change your thoughts, then change your ideals, and then understand yourself. That was, to me, probably the biggest theme. After you get through the whole story, you kind of find yourself saying, well, all this guy had to do is just change his damn ideas, change his thoughts. He just had to change. Well, more importantly, he had to understand himself. He had to understand why he was wearing the armor, why he couldn't take it off. And Merlin ran him through the he ran him almost dead a few times to teach him the lesson, but that was one of the big themes I took away. Change your thoughts, change your ideas. Look, guys, if you don't like the way you're thinking, then think of something else. Change the way you think. When you change your thoughts, you change your ideas, you understand where they come from. You understand why you think that way. You understand all these things about yourself. Your entire world will change, and you will create whatever world you want. I had this talk with my daughter yesterday, David. I'll share with you. My daughter is not the most athletic person in the world. Okay? It's just how she was built, She's capable. She just doesn't really, how do I put this? It's not that she doesn't care. She doesn't understand how to apply herself because she has always been accustomed to applying herself in other ways. She's always lived up to a different idea. So now she plays on a basketball team. She's old enough now where she goes to school and they have more organized sports, things like this. And, I was, like I always am with my children and my family, I was, very upfront with her. And I said, look, if you're happy with riding the bench the whole season, if that makes you happy, if you're okay with that, then I'm okay with that too. I said, I've seen you on the court. You look like you don't give a shit. You look like you don't care. You look like you're not trying. And I told her, I said, look, I don't care if you play basketball or not. It's not going to change the way I feel about you and the way that I look at you and see you. I can see deep inside you. I know who you are, and that's fine with me. I'm happy with you the way you are. But there's a thing here, and then she says, well, I'm not the fastest person out there. I'm not the strongest. I'm not the best. I can't shoot as good as everyone else. I can't dribble, blah, 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 right? I said, well, that's okay. But you're still cutting yourself short because you're living up to an idea that tells you that you're not the best. You don't have to be the best player, but you have to be the best person that you can be on that basketball court. You know?
Yeah.
Don't sell yourself short. I don't want you to, I don't care if you're the best, Michelle. Just be the best you that you can be.
Yeah. Yeah, it's real easy to compare ourselves with other people, what they're doing and what they have. But really, the only thing you can really compare yourself to is yourself. And between people, it's like apples and oranges.
Yeah. To your point, David, I told her that you will never be this or that or he or she, but you will always be you, and you have to change the way that you think to change who you are. We always complain about how shitty the world is, how crappy our lives are. We don't understand that it is us that put us there in the first place. It is us that have been feeding ourselves bullshit the whole time, and we can change it when we want to. That's the great thing about it, David. You can change it when you want to. It's not going to be easy. It's going to be hard. You're going to cry. You're going to bleed. You're going to hurt. But you can change it. This poor knight, damn, dude, he couldn't take the armor off. He couldn't eat. He couldn't drink. His wife and kids couldn't see him. He virtually loses everything just to change the way he thinks, in turn to change his life, change his world.
Well, like they said in the story, everybody understands crusade, but very few understands the truth.
Yeah.
I mean, I was listening to a Alan Watts YouTube video, and he was talking, and he said you could tell good music from poor music by what they're talking about. Poor music talks about other things. He said good music talks about itself. And you can't ask Bach, what does this song mean? He'll tell you, listen, it's in there. I mean, if you listen to some of the stuff that comes out these days, it's just it's pointed outward. The music is about everything except itself. And with that, you really lose a lot of its meaning. It has no meaning in and of itself. It's just borrowed from other things, which is part of the problem that we've been talking about today is the regurgitation of things. People want to shift information around and think that they have built something out of it. It's all as old as the sun. I mean, it's been here since. Most of the stuff we're figuring out has been worked out before. People before us have known this. It's new to us. Now, the only difference there is did you work your own way to it, or did you look at what somebody else did and just follow in their footsteps?
Right.
Because one is actually working on the thing, and the other one's just speculating about it. So I much prefer the work myself, but I've been a speculator before.
Yep. I can't add anything to that, man. Crusade is not the truth, but you can take a crusade to the truth, and a lot of us have to do it over and over and over again to find that truth. My truth is not David's truth, folks. David's truth is not Charles' truth. However, our truth is similar, but it's only our truth if we accept it, understand it, and live it.